had definitely some similar experiences with folks wanting to maybe take a break to see perhaps how long the self-quarantining might go on before making a decision about transitioning to telehealth, since that hasn't been the primary way in which we have done our work together. I think that those individuals I'm working with who are not in the midst of a crisis outside of what we're dealing with collectively really have wanted to at least temporarily sort of sit with that on their own, and perhaps even test out their coping strategies to the extent that they are able, just to sort of see how some of the work we've been doing might actually be benefiting them in a sort of in a real life experimental kind of a way that we might not have otherwise been able to demonstrate. So I would concur with that.
I've had a similar experience as well. I think for me and for a lot of the other staff at the counseling center, I think part of what has happened is for students, a lot of, I don't think this is unique to my university, but a lot of universities have been in this transition phase where at first it was kind of extending a spring break, and then it was maybe having classes be offered virtually for a period of time. And now my university, I think a lot of universities have shifted to online classes for the duration of the semester. And so I think a lot of what we're finding is for some students returning home, and in this transition, it's just not the first thing on their mind. And the other thing I think is interesting is for some students who are returning home, staying connected to therapy is maybe one of the most significant things on their mind, because returning home is not a great environment. So ranging from, parents are not supportive to maybe it's an emotionally abusive situation, even to I'm used to having the structure and the freedom and the independence of my life on campus. And that's been just such a significant part of people's kind of personal and professional development. And so to return home, it just shifts things. So I know part of what's come up for my center, and I think I know a lot of universities are navigating this too, is we don't have the infrastructure for telemental health yet. We are really quickly working on that, and especially working for an institution, it's taking some time. And so trying to figure out a way to, I know somebody had posed the question of how do you reach out, how do you talk this through? Like part of what we're doing is reaching out now and saying, here's where we're at now, knowing that where we're at now might shift. And I'm imagining for students that is, without being able to say for sure what things are gonna look like, it's, I think it's confusing and it's bringing up some uncertainty, and I don't know if that's resonating for anyone, but I know that's something that it feels like this is happening in phases. Like right now we're in one phase and it's certainly going to shift. I'm not even sure what that's going to look like.
One question I want to address from an anonymous attendee. I'll read it. It says, identify as an Asian American, and it has been really hard to see on social media and the news about the racism and discrimination / violence against Asians throughout the world, particularly those who identify as Chinese after the outbreak of COVID-19. How do we address and navigate this kind of violence?
This is Valene, and I just wanted to express thanks to that individual for asking that question. It's such an important question and such a good question at this time. I think, I guess my awareness, my understanding and kind of what I think about is that knowledge is power. I mean, that I feel like many of us as counseling psychologists and counseling psychologists in training are putting out such good information about the problematic aspects of xenophobia and the ways in which we need to work to address it through our field as healers, etc. I would just continue to make that information as visible as possible. I also want to acknowledge that certainly it is not my experience. I am not Asian American. I don't identify as Asian American. And so I want to speak to my position as a woman of color. that sometimes it can feel exhausting or challenging or frightening or unsafe to attempt to address some of this stuff. And just to remember and to ask and encourage our allies to continue to be a part of the fight with us. So it may not feel entirely safe to be, having these conversations or confronting some of these issues. But remember those of us that are allies, and this is what, in some ways, this is what we train for, right, as allies. So allow us also to support you, and we do need to also make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable for contributing to that fight. It feels like such an insufficient question, such an insufficient answer to such an important question, but I just, again, want to express thanks for somebody bringing that up on the front end, especially for clinicians. That's such an important thing to consider.
And if I could just add one thing, and this is not specific to the question, but I think it's sort of a broader conversation to be having with clients right now. Is I've been advising people to be judicious in their social media intake at this point. There's, I think, because of so much uncertainty around this, there's a tendency to want to either read the news a lot or read social media a lot, which is often how people get their news. And so I've been having a lot of conversations with my clients about being sort of a little stricter in their social media diet than they typically are, because a lot of there are some nasty, ugly comments out there, as the questioner brought up. And so, not to say that sort of not just ignoring them is the best strategy, but it is at least one strategy, is to not be exposing yourself to a lot of nasty commenting if possible.
I also just want to highlight, Dr. Carlton Green had also sent a message about some of the collaboration and advocacy work he's done as an administrative individual working in an administrative position. So that's in the chat box for folks to see.
I was almost building on exactly what you just shared, Valene, in terms of Dr. Green sharing resources. I have been so appreciative of dialogues that are happening across the Division 17 listserv in this, addressing this exact issue. And so I think also building a little bit on what you shared, Valene, for folks who maybe can serve as allies in this regard, to find that way to stay connected with with those resources, with ways to dispel those the racism that's happening around that, and I mean, just continue to educate ourselves and to advocate for folks. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of the clients that we connect with. I'm thinking of the people in our lives in general. I'm thinking of the community that we're a part of. Maybe the supervisees that we're working with, the supervisors that we're working with. I mean, we're so interconnected. I think so much of what we're finding is when we get the message to kind of physically disconnect, not only do we find ways to stay connected, but we find how connected we actually are. And so using that to motivate us to call things out and to name things that are incorrect and racist.
Another question we have is, one of my questions is how folks are managing clients who are not taking reasonable precautions or willing to do teletherapy. There's been a few, someone answers on the chat, but I thought it might be worthwhile to directly address this question.
Although not typically my clinical stance, I've been taking a little bit more of a hard line on this one. For my own safety and the safety of all of my clients who I care very deeply about, I'm just sort of insisting that's the direction we need to go at this point. And for the most part, I would say that most of my clients have been pretty receptive to it. And wanting to be open with experiencing their fears along with them. I'm not afraid to say that, this is a little uncomfortable and new for me too, but just like walking into the office for the first time was perhaps a little uncomfortable, and pushing one outside their comfort zone. This is giving us another opportunity to experience that again together.
I also tend to be someone who likes to give context for things. So I realize there are a lot of things to be thinking about when shifting to a telemental health platform, and they're in place for a reason. And so I think for folks, giving that context and explaining, oh, the question's gone. I don't know exactly if there were particular things that folks are having, that people are hearing consistently in terms of what challenges are for clients. But I tend to think when we can give context, I think people can engage with it a little bit differently. If we just say, this is what you have to do because you have to do it, it's hard for that to resonate for folks. And then this isn't exactly the question, but another thing that comes up for me when I think about resources is we're also still navigating some complexities around licensure laws, and people, again, University Counseling Center context, maybe there are people that we were working with who maybe would have been totally up for teletherapy, but they're not. I'm in Virginia, they're not in Virginia anymore. And so that brings up, that again is a piece where I'm giving some context and talking through, okay, how do we get you connected with some resources where you're at? Because there are some limitations to it. And so I think part of it is just the giving context and being transparent.
Thank you, Allie. And this is Annalise again. I'm popping on because Lisa Griffith had her hand up, or their hand up. I don't know your pronouns. I'm gonna unmute you, Lisa. So did you have a question? And Lisa, feel free to put your question in the Q&A box. But just for everyone, if you raise your hand, we will, at the soonest opportunity, unmute you. Right now, Lisa, you are unmuted if you would like to ask your question. We'll give you a few more seconds and then I'll send it back to the panel. All right, it's all you.
If I could just add one sort of suggestion, is that typically, I only see clients a couple days a week. I'm only in practice part-time, but and I share an office, so I can only see clients on the couple of days that I normally see them in person. But because of moving fully online, because of the outbreak, I've been trying to incentivize clients to continue doing therapy using the teletherapy service. By giving them additional flexibility on the meeting day and the time. So for those people that I feel are maybe a little reticent to make that transition, that I think would still benefit from weekly or biweekly therapy, offering them some scheduling flexibility seems to help make it kind of more of a perk.
I'd actually also like to make a comment. So what I didn't mention earlier in my introduction is that I'm a psychologist and the Military Sexual Trauma Services Coordinator for the Edith Norris Rogers VA Hospital in Bedford, Massachusetts. And so I always preface anything that I'm saying outside the VA space by saying that I'm not speaking as a VA spokesperson. I am speaking from my own independent experience as Valene Whittaker, informed by my work in the VA. So that's my disclaimer. I have found, we have found in the VA that we actually have been encouraged and told that, we should not be canceling our appointments, but we need to make every effort to try to encourage the person to understand the seriousness of the decision to come in person versus to stay home and enact telehealth services. And I know that the VA has also been incredibly flexible in allowing us to utilize different services to try to remove those barriers that may already exist for veterans and their family members who are trying to come in for resources and for support. So we have kind of just gotten as creative as everybody else has in terms of using telephone sessions, a combination of phone, and if we can see somebody through the internal VA Video Connect, which is our internal telehealth system, even using doxy.me, holding our own test calls. You know, they're really just encouraging us to do whatever we can do to break down those barriers. But I agree that I think a lot of it is really just impressing on and helping the person understand this is not just about their own protection, but the protection of other people. And something that goes over really well for veterans is to keep in mind the protection of other veterans who are getting care. So using that as a means of encouraging folks to consider their decisions around coming in and not coming in. I also wanted to highlight a resource that I believe was in the chat, shared by Dr. Mary O'Leary Wiley from Dr. Brian Kim's recent, I believe he wrote an article for his local publication on the importance of keeping in mind protecting others in our environment by limiting our social interactions and encouraging social distancing. So that should be in the webinar chat. And if it's not there for everybody to see, I'm sure we can resend it.
So another question we have, what do you think is the best way or ways to cope with the fear and anxiety during this period? What self-care strategies do you engage in? That's open to our panelists, but please post some comments as well from all of you out there. We value what you found helpful as well. So. One thing that I've thought of as I've considered this is I enjoy social contact, hanging out with people that I love and that I like to be close to. And so I've been trying to think of ways to maintain that through video chats, through social media chats, through other things and other ways. Here in Iowa, it hasn't got quite as bad as it is in places like California or New York. But as I'm thinking about that, I'm going to try to be a little bit more proactive about reaching out. Luckily, we live in a time when it's fairly easy to talk to reach out to people from around the world. So I think I recognize the need for myself, and that's something I'm going to try to do.
Yeah, I second that, James. And also something I've been doing is taking really long walks. So my dog has been exhausted as a result of this coronavirus outbreak because he's gotten to go on much longer walks than he's typically used to. But it's a good way to like get exercise, get sunshine, you know, still being compliant with the social distancing measures that we're all encouraged to do. So that's been a big one for me.
I also really enjoy cooking and baking, and I find that particularly in times of uncertainty, having a recipe and being able to follow it from start to finish really gives me a great sense of calm in knowing that if I tend to stick with the directions, that in all likelihood I will produce a delicious product at the end of it. And there's something really satisfying about that, and other people tend to enjoy it as well.
I'm loving the ideas that are coming up in the chat. Yeah, I want to make sure I'm using, that's the chat, the Q&A is the other thing. Yes, this is awesome.
And so I also want to add something I just finished doing with some of my good girlfriends from grad school. We just had a virtual happy hour. I've seen a lot of people holding those with their friends and loved ones, using Zoom meeting or another platform to get together, have a beverage of your choice or not, or snacks, and just really take the time to reconnect. And see people visually. And I've also seen it's kind of run rampant on social media, but DJ D Nice, I believe, has been holding some homeschool dance parties. So if you were on Instagram, you could search for D Nice and follow him live, and he's playing some great music. And I know a lot of folks are kind of getting their energy going by dancing and just connecting with people across the country.
I so appreciate this question, and I feel like I've been hearing it a lot lately, and it's always a hard question for me to answer. And right now it feels particularly challenging, I think, because, and I know somebody had posed a question about being a supervisor, but I think right now, more so than ever, I am finding that I am in a space where I'm being asked to show up for other people. I'm thinking like trainees, I'm thinking clients, I'm thinking just even other people at the university who are seeking a kind of grounded presence in a time of incredible transition and uncertainty moving forward. And I am experiencing all of those things because I don't know what's going to happen moving forward. Like, I don't know what our system's going to look like. I don't know how our training program is going to evolve. And I know we'll eventually get there. But I guess just to name, it simultaneously feels so important to be reflecting on that question. And it feels really hard to be thinking about that right now. To try and find that balance between like showing up for other people, but also knowing that I need to take care of myself. I don't know if that resonates for anyone, but I just felt the need to name that.
There's another question. For those of you who have dependents, how are you managing the realities of school/daycare closures and having to work from home via teletherapy? Are you preparing clients for possible interruptions? What strategies are you employing? I have a preschooler at home who doesn't really understand privacy.
I personally don't share this experience, and I wonder if this is maybe a time where if other folks who are on the call, but maybe unfortunately are muted, have thoughts or that resonates for them, this is where the chat could be super helpful. So just to name that.
I mean, for what it's worth, I also don't have children, so I have not had any sessions interrupted by a child, but I have had several sessions interrupted by my dog, Fluffy. And I think my clients, I think they understand that we're living in extraordinary times right now. And so, you know, they have been very patient and understanding when the dog is barking and that's disruptive to the session. So hopefully, even if it's, you know, if it's kids that are potentially interrupting sessions, that clients will be similarly understanding. And it might even be worth being proactive about it at the front end of your sessions to let your clients know that your kids are home with you and that they might pop into frame at some point, or at least being thoughtful about how you, you know, sort of introduce that to your clients.
Likewise, I think it's important to recognize that the same might be true on the other end of the video or call as well. That, and I think we have a question related to this in the Q&A as well, is that, you know, our clients may not have the privacy that they are accustomed to during our sessions as well. And of course, while we ask that they be considerate of that and do their very best to find a private space where they will be uninterrupted. They themselves can't always guarantee that that will happen. And so I've been thinking a little bit about that for myself too, trying to get creative about how people might be able to manage that, and maybe even suggesting that some people may have to get in their car and go to a parking lot to have some privacy and space. Again, that would hopefully mean they're not letting go of any other responsibilities they have at home to do that. But wanting to be aware that it's probably not comfortable on their end 100% of the time either.
Thank you, Marcy, for making that comment. I can absolutely echo that. I know for me as a clinician, with some of my clients who have children who now they're at home with, I've worked to just do my best to be really flexible. So I have a couple that I'm seeing, and they've said that pretty much the time they can meet is during nap time. And that's even with additional childcare resources, that's the one time that they can get away. I also at work have a number of colleagues who have worked with leadership to see if there's flexibility in their work schedules, so that maybe there is some work that they can do while they're working off hours or in the evenings, for those folks who are on a kind of a set 9 to 5 routine, or even on weekends. Yes, yeah, just want to add that.
All right, another question. Does anyone have any resources for low-income, economically marginalized clients who maybe don't have the option to work from home at this time, for keeping themselves and their families physically safe and emotionally well? And that kind of goes to some of our clients maybe that are private pay or that pay co-pays. They might not have a job anymore. I know some insurance companies have waived the co-pays to help with that, but what are some, I guess that's one of the resources, but what are some things that you have done or are thinking of doing to deal with that issue?
I really appreciate this question, and I think it speaks to a feeling of helplessness that I've had quite a bit lately around this issue, and just the worries that I have for so many people who are affected. And I think for me, it speaks to wanting to really get to know my local community better, because I'm not sure that any one of us is going to have an answer that will be helpful to everybody that's listening in. But I have just found that through some social media posts and other ways in which I've been checking in on my neighbors more frequently, that there are a lot of things that people are doing on a really small scale, but that might still be just what somebody needs, whether that is, a porch pantry, I think one of my neighbors has called it, where there is a bookshelf that she's put on her porch, and people are dropping off and taking items as they need them or as they can spare them. So those types of things help me feel connected, help me feel more hopeful, but also, trying not to feel responsible to having all the answers for everyone and all of those fears too. It's a really hard space to be in.
I'll also put this in the chat, but I think that this might have been something that was highlighted as well. Given Hour is a nonprofit organization that provides essentially low cost or free therapy for folks, and it's relied on by providers like us who feel that they have the capacity to voluntarily see people for treatment.
Okay, Next question. Do you share your fears / anxiety / concerns with your clients about COVID-19? Why or why not? Do you think having this conversation will be helpful for them if you do self-disclose your feelings / opinions about this? So this seems to be a question regarding self-disclosure. How much do you talk about your own feelings about COVID-19, or how much do you hold back on that? What has your experience been with that?
I'll just sort of kick it off here. I've been pretty transparent that this has been a significant concern for me, and I think it would be, you know, that sort of echoes my stance as a therapist. Oftentimes, I'm not one to be really keeping everything super close to the vest. If I'm having some feeling in session, I'm willing to share that oftentimes if I think it'll be helpful. But at this point in time, this is just such an extraordinary time that we're living in, especially, like I said, in my context in New York City, where life has really drastically changed and very quickly in the span of about a week. It would seem disingenuous if I didn't at least acknowledge that I am also worried and that there is a level of anxiety that I think we're all feeling. I try not to keep my feelings as the focus, but it's certainly something that I feel is legitimate to discuss with my clients.
I kind of take the similar stance. I tend to be fairly transparent as well. Kind of throughout this process, at first, I didn't think this was going to be that big of a deal. It was going to be similar to the swine flu and the bird flu that we've had in the past, and then it got bigger and bigger, and I was somewhat surprised. And I'm pretty open about, hey, this is a day-to-day situation. It could change every day, which it has in a lot of places, and I think some of me sharing some of those feelings and kind of my experience with moving to teletherapy and my experience while doing those video therapy sessions has been kind of helpful for my clients to kind of relate to me and to kind of maintain that relationship, and they've been able to be open about that too. So it's been my limited experience with that.
I also want to highlight Catherine Cascio. My apologies for mispronounced your name. Comment to all of us because I feel like that's very much in line with what I would suggest too. She mentions, apologies if that is not your pronoun. They mention, I have validated clients' concerns and shared that I have been using the same recommendations I give them, limiting social media and news, increasing self-care, maintaining a routine, etc. And I've also shared how hard it can be to do those things for myself at times. And I would agree wholeheartedly. I rely a lot on transparency and authenticity in my work with my clients. I really try not to keep that distance from them, especially given this unprecedented moment that we're in. So I really like Catherine's response in this instance.
All right, another question. It says, my need for support from this webinar is twofold. One, as a supervisor, what advocacy can I, SCP, and APA do for my supervisees, parentheses, especially grad students and pracs? My understanding is that they are not allowed to provide telehealth services and will be doing more outreach programming online. Those panelists who work at AUCC, is this your shared experience? And then two, is there knowledge about how we as mental health practitioners could provide mental health services to healthcare workers who are at the forefront of COVID-19? So let's focus on the first one, supervisors and supervisees. What is your experience with helping the supervisees that aren't allowed to provide telehealth services? I know as me and as a licensed psychologist, fairly easy for me to move to telehealth. There's as far as the only limitations there are some of the insurance companies are fairly stubborn about paying for it, but it sounds like they're moving to the end of doing it in this emergency situation. But if that wasn't an option for me, I would be stuck. So yeah. What are your comments or thoughts?
I can share some initial thoughts. I think this is such a tough one because I think part of what we're seeing is especially like, I mean, even as recently as this weekend, APIC and Commission on Accreditation and some other folks like got together for a joint statement that's like incredibly supportive of programs being really creative. And I think this is where I just feel so grateful for communities of people who are thinking through similar things, and also trainees who are living this and who can also kind of say, I'm on a listserv where somebody named, our trainees are going to get a different experience this year. It's not going to be what they thought, but they're going to learn some incredible skills about being a psychologist in these particular times and what that looks like. So it's different skills, still incredible skills. I just so appreciated that. And what I so appreciate about this question, I don't have a solid answer, I'm just, continuing to do my own research, is the dual, what I find confusing is that there's consistently also a dual message of, yes, there's a lot of support, but also consult with your licensure board and also consult with your institution. And I think in some ways it just speaks to all of the different moving pieces where in an ideal world, they would all align and we'd be able to move forward right now. And right now they don't all seem to be aligning. And so I think there are some university counseling centers who are having folks who are not there as kind of full-time employees providing telehealth, and maybe they have the infrastructure and the support for that. There are other ones who are trying to navigate the space in the office, like that might look different, but the days that folks are teleworking, that might look different. So, I mean, I say that to, the question is this your shared experience? My answer is yes, that this is my shared experience, that it seems like it's confusing and kind of complicated right now. I also, my hope is over time, again, as trainees, and I think this is part of what's, Shasneen, part of what I think maybe Catherine shared that, yes. So having trainees create drop-in video groups, that's part of how our center is navigating that. I also think part of what's going to happen, and here's my real genuine hope, is as students are, again, this is specific to UCCs, but as students are functioning in a totally different way that they're used to, we can reach out to students and get a sense of what do they need from us? And then how do we kind of show up and provide that support? I think, again, right now, it feels like this incredible transition time where we're not sure. There will be a time, I keep telling myself this, there will be a time where even if it's not perfect, it will never be perfect, where it feels a little bit more settled. And I think that's where we can come up with some really great creative opportunities for our trainees, for our students, and for all of us to think creatively about how we show up and support each other. I don't know if other folks have ideas around just kind of training programs broadly, though.
I can echo a lot of what you have been saying, Allie, and I've been watching, I've repositioned the chat box right under your image. So I've been kind of watching what's been shared in the chat box as well. Again, I'm not working in a university counseling center, college or university counseling center right now. We do, at my VA, we have a large training program with prac students, interns, and postdocs. And I really like that my training program and the training directors in my program have attempted to take a step-by-step approach as much as possible. So rather than making like a full-fledged sweeping decision that, okay, well, we're done with the prac year, we're ending it here. The training directors have really worked at the local level within our hospital to advocate with hospital leadership. And I would probably say this would be hopefully translatable to ACCs, to just impress on them the importance of what this looks like for psychology in particular, and the unique needs of psychology trainees as well. They also, I mean, I think they, you know, relied and really encouraged us as supervisors to make sure we're continually checking in with our client and with our training. Oh, that's interesting, Freudian slip. I'm sure we've all made it. Checking in with our supervisees about how they've been doing in this process and what their needs are, Allie, which you absolutely mentioned. I've also seen on some other listservs that I'm a part of that there have been instances where somebody has brought something to the forefront expressing concern for trainees, and they've been an APA member, and it's been picked up by the Education Directorate. So they have offered themselves as well as a resource with respect to advocacy and supporting folks in their local spaces, as well as you know, within the association more broadly. But that is such a tough question. And, you know, I'm wondering if that's maybe something that we can also work on taking back and working with SCP leadership, certainly other sections, you know, section for college and university counseling centers and other aspects of leadership to see about what we can do to continue to advocate for our students and trainees.
To update the question about those who have dependents, I actually texted a friend of mine who is going to start next week doing telehealth therapy at home, and she said her plan, she has 2 small children, 4th grade and 1st grade, I believe. Her plan is they're going to be on a different floor than her. She'll be in a locked room with a noise machine, but she'll also have a video camera so that she can watch them downstairs. They'll be doing packets and watching TV shows, chores and playtime, and those kind of things. Her partner also will get home around kind of mid-afternoon, and then we'll take care of them after that. But they'll be on the main level and basement. She'll be upstairs. That's kind of how she's managing the situation. And then with that kind of video camera, so she can kind of see how they're going on, while at the same time kind of have her telehealth going on. I hope that's helpful. I personally have children, but my situation is a little bit different. I have a office really close to my home that I use for clients, but it's going to be mainly empty. So I'm going to go there to do my telehealth, and my partner's going to be watching my children, and so couldn't really answer that question. So hopefully that's helpful for the person that posed that question.
So it looks like we're kind of running up against the clock here, and we need to start wrapping up. So I thought we would take just a quick moment and check in with the panelists and see if they have any final thoughts as we're ending our call tonight. For myself, I think the one thing that's standing out to me from both the comments as well as the questions that were raised is that we're just kind of like, we're all learning as we go here. We're all learning on the fly, and if there was ever a time to be patient with yourself and kind and forgiving with yourself as a practitioner, I think this is that time. And that, you know, there is no handbook that we can pull off the shelf that says how to practice in a time of you know, a pandemic, at least not to my knowledge. And so we're all having to learn as we go. And I think if we continue to have these types of events and forums, we can all share and learn from each other as we go along. Do any of the other panelists want to jump in?
Just to kind of echo kind of what you said, there's a lot of changes that have been happening. There's a lot of changes that will continue to happen. So maybe we can practice self-compassion and a wise mind, taking it one step at a time, focusing on the moment, and taking care of ourselves when we need it, taking care of our clients as needed as things change. And I think clients can be are very resilient and will adapt as well. And again, I appreciate this group and everyone being here, and this is part of my self-care, is being with the leadership team, but also with all of you, getting your feedback, and that's been really helpful for me. Normally I don't do things in the evenings or even on the weekends, but I kind of sacrificed this to be here, and I thought it was helpful. So thank you very much for being involved.
Something that's I 100% agree with, or what you both shared, Chris and James, really resonates for me. Another thing that I so appreciated is hearing from the other folks who are on the call through the chat box. It's making me think, I wonder if there's a way, Annalise, I can ask this offline. Well, I'm going to ask it now and then we can talk offline, where we can maybe keep access to some of these questions, because part of what I'm thinking is it would be incredible to just like, I don't know if we'll come up with a plan for like posing some of these questions to the professional prac listserv. So shameless plug, if you're not a member, join, it's free. It's awesome. Where we can kind of keep some of these dialogues going, because we are, you know, just a few folks who have our own lived experience. And and it's something that has been standing out to me is just so appreciating the collective wisdom and everyone's willingness to, I mean, this is like ranging from listservs to social medias to meetings I've been in, just like share resources, to share time, to share space. So my hope is that we can continue this conversation, because it feels like this is very much just the beginning.
I love what you shared, Allie. And there is a task force that's meeting tomorrow night at 6 p.m. I just put that in the chat box. If you have capacity, I know everyone is serving so many others right now, but if you feel like you have a little capacity, that group is most likely going to get a Google Doc going. There will be a transcript of the chat box. Valene was asking about that earlier, so we should be able to get that out to folks in addition. So I love that. There's also a student-sponsored webinar on Wednesday. So if there are webinar topics that this group, the section on professional practice, wants to follow up with, please drop those ideas in the chat box because we can track those.
There was a last question asking if there was going to be subsequent Zooms related to this topic. I think it sounds like there was some interest. I think we can do it if you want to. If you do have interest in that, maybe let us know in that chat box. And yeah, we're up for doing that if needed. So.
Yeah, I would echo that. Certainly, you know, the more we hear from folks who have an interest, the more we can work to create this space. Just to give you all an idea of the turnaround and support we got from SCP leadership, we had our leadership team meeting on Monday, came up with this idea at 7 p.m., quick turnaround, and we got support from Annalise and the rest of the cabinet and other stakeholders, Dr. Lisa Ferdinand, who is the VP for professional practice, and also the Liberation Incubator was also doing stuff. So we were able to turn this around super quick. So please do reach out to us if you want more opportunities to connect as practitioners. In the chat box, a couple of links included for information on how to join our section, and a direct link to a Google form to join our section. Just as Allie mentioned, it's free. We're just so grateful for everybody who took the time to be here tonight. This is really wonderful.
Okay, well, we are about out of time, so I just want to thank all of the panelists for joining us today. As Valene mentioned, this was a real speedy operation in the last week or so, so I'm so glad that we were able to have such a nice turnout tonight. We also want to thank Annalise and Division 17 for supporting this and all of the other efforts that they're doing. We also want to thank the audience for sending in their questions and commenting in the chat. We also want to plug the upcoming webinar. It's in the chat thread. If you just go up a little, it's going to be taking place on Wednesday, the 25th at 6 p.m. Eastern time, and the link for that Zoom is available there. You should also be seeing those in your emails, which would have also contained the link for tonight's session. And as Allie mentioned as well, I also put the link to our membership form. So if you're interested in joining the section for professional practice, we'd love to have you. It's a free membership, so there's really no reason not to. And we really do appreciate you all attending tonight's call. So stay safe, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and wash your hands.